There is a moment when you arrive home after a long day when before you even set down your bag, your hand reaches for the curtains. You pull them shut. The glare disappears. The harshness softens. And something inside you, something tight and overworked, slowly begins to unclench. You didn't plan it. You didn't think about it. Your body just knew. This is what it needs. Dim light, quiet shadow, a room that feels wrapped rather than exposed. Maybe you are the person whose bedroom has always been dark, even in the morning. The one who keeps the blinds angled just so, letting in only slivers of light. The one who, in someone else's apartment flooded with sun and white walls, feels vaguely on edge without being able to explain why. Your friends want to open the windows. You smile and say nothing. But inside, you're already calculating how long until you can return to your own dimness, your own refuge of low lamps and closed curtains. People notice. Sometimes they comment. They call you a night owl, a vampire, a cave dweller, and you laugh along. But what they don't understand is that this isn't about being dramatic or antisocial. It isn't a quirk or a mood. It is something that feels as necessary as food or sleep, a physical and emotional need for an environment that isn't too much, a world that doesn't demand so much from your senses all at once. The strange thing is that in the dark, you think more clearly. You feel more yourself. Something about low light removes a layer of pressure from the air. Colors stop competing for your attention. The textures of the room soften. Voices from outside seem further away. In the dark, the world asks less of you, and you find that you can finally breathe. And if you've ever felt guilty for this preference, as if preferring shadow to sunlight made you somehow broken or strange, I want you to hear something. There is a deep, researched psychological reason why your nervous system reaches for the dark. And understanding it might change the way you see yourself entirely. If you've ever felt most at peace in a dim room, this video is for you. We're going to explore what psychology says about the preference for darkness, why some people find calm in low light while others find it strange, and what this tells us about your nervous system, your history, and the way you learn to feel safe in the world. Comment below. Do you prefer dim rooms or bright ones? I want to know how many people feel genuinely calmer when the lights are low. And if you want to keep exploring the psychology behind behaviors that almost no one understands, subscribe to the channel. To understand why some people are drawn to darkness, we have to start with the nervous system. Not everyone's nervous system works the same way. Research in sensory processing has shown that roughly 15 to 20% of the human population has what psychologists and neuroscientists call high sensory processing sensitivity. A trait first formally studied by psychologist Elaine Aron in the 1990s. People with this trait don't just notice more. Their brains literally process environmental stimuli more deeply, more thoroughly, and with more intensity than average. Light isn't just light to them. It is information. And like any information system receiving too much data at once, it can overload. When the nervous system is wired this way, bright environments don't just feel unpleasant, they feel genuinely taxing. The fluorescent buzz of a supermarket, the midday glare of an open plaza, the clinical brightness of a modern office, these environments demand something from highly sensitive people that ordinary environments do not. They demand constant processing, constant filtering, constant management of input that won't stop arriving. And after a full day in a bright, stimulating world, the body craves the opposite the way a thirsty person craves water. But sensory sensitivity is only one layer of the story. There is another concept that matters here: arousal regulation. The brain is constantly trying to maintain an optimal level of stimulation, not too much, not too little. Psychologists call this the Yerkes-Dodson curve. For many people, bright light, particularly artificial bright light, increases cortisol levels and activates the sympathetic nervous system, the same system responsible for the fight-or-flight response. Dim light, on the other hand, signals to the brain that the environment is safe, calm, and no longer demanding vigilance. The parasympathetic nervous system, the system responsible for rest, digestion, and recovery, begins to activate. Muscles soften. Heart rate slows. The body says we can stop now. This is why darkness doesn't just feel comfortable to certain people. It feels medicinal. It isn't escapism. It is regulation. The body is using the environment to do what it cannot always do on its own. Calm down. And there is nothing pathological about that. Now, here is where the psychological history becomes important. Because while sensory sensitivity is partly genetic, the emotional relationship you have with dim, enclosed, quiet spaces is often shaped long before you could name it. Many people who feel most at peace in the dark grew up in homes that felt too loud. Not necessarily loud in a literal sense, though sometimes that too, but loud in an emotional sense. Homes where the atmosphere was unpredictable, where conflict arrived without warning, where you never quite knew when the next storm would come. In those environments, a child learns quickly that stimulation is not neutral. Stimulation is often the beginning of something uncomfortable. In those homes, a dark room, a bedroom with the door closed, a closet, a corner under the stairs, became something very specific, a place where you were not seen, not called upon, not required to perform or manage or respond. Darkness meant invisibility. And invisibility, for a child in a chaotic or overwhelming household, meant safety. The brain learned the association early. Brightness and exposure are demanding, even threatening. Dimness and enclosure are safe. This is a form of classical conditioning as deep and formative as any. By the time you're an adult, the preference for dim rooms doesn't feel like a learned behavior. It feels like a personality trait, an aesthetic preference, a simple matter of taste. But underneath it, still alive in the nervous system, is that original equation. Dark means protected. Bright means vulnerable. There is also a concept worth naming here called the womb state. The neurological and psychological comfort of enclosed, dark and warm environments that mirrors the very first safe space any human being ever inhabited. Before birth, before light, before sound, there was the warm dark of the womb. Some researchers and somatic therapists suggest that the preference for dim, enclosing environments in adulthood can be a form of regression to that original safety. The body's memory of what it felt like to exist without being required to do anything, without being exposed to anything, without the world making demands. It is not weakness, it is an ancient kind of memory. The hidden cost of this preference, however, is real and worth acknowledging honestly. When the need for darkness becomes a retreat from life rather than a recovery from it, something shifts. You begin to organize your days around avoiding bright places. You turn down invitations to outdoor events not because you don't want connection, but because the thought of sitting in full sunlight for 3 hours exhausts you before you've even gone. You choose the corner table at the restaurant, the seat at the back of the room, the walk that avoids the open plaza. And slowly, the world you actually inhabit begins to shrink. The places that once felt overwhelming haven't changed, but your relationship with managing them has narrowed rather than expanded. The difference between healthy regulation and avoidance is not always obvious. Both feel like relief in the short term, but one builds your capacity to exist in the world as it is, and the other quietly reduces that capacity one curtain at a time. Step 1. Name the need without shame. The next time you reach for the curtains, pause for one moment before you pull them closed. Not to stop yourself, you are allowed to close the curtains, but to notice what you are feeling. Name it out loud if you can. I am overwhelmed. I am overstimulated. My nervous system needs to recover. This is called interoceptive awareness, the ability to sense and name what is happening inside your body. Research by neuroscientist Antonio Damasio shows that simply naming an internal state reduces its intensity by activating the prefrontal cortex. You are not eliminating the need, you are understanding it. And understanding a need is the first step to meeting it consciously rather than compulsively. Step 2. Distinguish recovery from avoidance. Give yourself permission to use dim environments as a resource, a deliberate tool for nervous system regulation. 30 minutes of low light after a demanding day is self-care. But also begin to notice when the pattern moves into avoidance. When you cancel plans, shrink your world, or feel genuine anxiety at the thought of being in a bright place for a normal amount of time. This distinction matters. Recovery expands your capacity. Avoidance erodes it. If you notice you're in avoidance mode, the intervention isn't forcing yourself into brightness. It's gently, gradually expanding your tolerance through what therapists call graduated exposure, taking small steps toward the stimulating environments and conditions where you feel most resourced. Step 3. Investigate the emotional history. This step requires honesty and ideally the support of a therapist, though you can begin it alone. Sit in your dim room, in the comfort you know best, and ask yourself, what does this darkness protect me from? Not the sensory answer, not light, not stimulation, but the emotional answer. What did it once feel like to be fully seen, fully exposed, fully bright? Was that safe? Was brightness in your home a signal of something peaceful or something demanding? This kind of inquiry, which sits at the heart of somatic and psychodynamic therapy, doesn't demand that you give up what comforts you. It asks only that you understand why it became comfort in the first place. And in that understanding, something begins to loosen, a grip you didn't know you were holding. There is something quietly profound about the fact that human beings, in a world that has never been louder or more illuminated, still reach for the dark. Still close their curtains against the afternoon. Still feel most themselves when the light is low and the room is quiet, and the world, for a moment, stops arriving all at once. That impulse is not antisocial, it is not depressive, it is not broken. It is ancient. It is the nervous system remembering that not all safety comes from being in the middle of things. Some safety comes from stepping to the edge, from finding the corner, from choosing, deliberately, to be in a space that makes no demands on your senses, that asks nothing from your attention, your performance, your readiness to respond. If you grew up in a home that felt too intense, too bright, too loud, too unpredictable, then your preference for dim spaces isn't an accident. It is the record of what you needed and eventually found. A child who could not make the home quieter learned to find quiet inside it. The closet, the back bedroom, the hours after everyone else was asleep. You were not hiding from life. You were recovering the capacity to continue living it. And now, even as an adult, when the world gets to be too much, which it often does, you return to that knowledge. You close the curtains. You lower the low lamp. You let the shadows fill the corners of the room. And in that dimness, you remember, you are still here. You made it through the noise again. And here, in the quiet dark, you can be exactly as you are, unlit, undemanded, and finally, briefly, at rest. The dark was never the problem. It was always the answer your body already knew. If this spoke to you, share it with someone who also finds peace in quiet, dim spaces. And if you want to keep understanding the psychology behind attitudes that almost no one explains, subscribe to the channel. Because sometimes the most healing thing you can do is simply close the curtains and let yourself be still.